Welcome back, and now in this third video of our 4-video series, we will take up the third and final play of this trilogy, Eumenides. Now this name Eumenides is in fact the name of the Furies who were just introduced at the very end of Libation Bearers. Interestingly, the name Eumenides in Greek means kindly ones. Literally, it's deities who have beneficial force, essentially. And so something must have happened, because the Furies, as you saw presented at the end of Libation Bearers, are these really dreadful goddesses of vengeance who are about to go after Orestes at the behest of Orestes' mother, now a ghost, Clytemnestra, because Orestes killed her husband, his father, Agamemnon. So something has obviously happened to transform the Furies from these really horrible, terrifying goddesses into these relatively kindly ones. And of course, this play will reveal exactly how that came about. So the opening scene is now shifted away from Argos or Mycenae. It now is over at Delphi, the famous oracle of Apollo. And the opening character's appearance is the Pythia goddess, the one who oversees the oracle and takes in the questions, and also, according to some versions, supplies the answers for the questions. Now remember that the oracle, although it's usually associated with taking in questions and then providing divine answers, like divination essentially, can also be the place for the purification of a person who is corrupted with some kind of blood guilt, as in this case, regicide and parricide. And then, of course, also matricide, in the case specifically with Orestes. So Orestes has arrived at the Delphic oracle as a suppliant to Apollo in order to receive purification for the act of matricide, especially because, as we remember from Libation Bearers, it was Apollo himself who ordered this particular murder to be carried out. Remember that Apollo was in the favor of the Trojans in the Trojan War, but nonetheless also did not want to see Clytemnestra successfully carry out this murder against Agamemnon, and therefore wanted to see that murder avenged. So now we have the source of the conflict here in the family. It's really Apollo's role in this that's what brings Orestes to this state. So now he is a suppliant at Delphi. Originally he's there, and the Furies come in to essentially haunt him, but they cannot touch him because Orestes is on Apollo's altar. Eventually, Apollo tricks them by putting them to sleep. And the opening scene with the Pythia is that she comes along to go into the oracle to do some other business, and then she sees these horrifying, bloody, filthy creatures on the ground, and she comes rushing out in a state of terror. Well, they are asleep. They've been put to sleep by Apollo, and the result is that Orestes is able to sneak away from the altar. Even though he can be purified for the actual murder, he still is subject to some type of retribution from the ghost of his mother, and therefore that has to be cleared up in a legal way. And so Orestes is going to have to go to Athens in order to meet Apollo's half-sister Athena, who interestingly was on the favor of the Greeks destroying the Trojans, as it turns out. Okay, so putting the Furies to sleep is done in order to get Orestes to get off to Athens. After he sneaks away, Clytemnestra's ghost comes in very, very horrid stance and wakes the Furies up. It shakes them awake and tells them to get back on the road, going after Orestes as fast as possible. So that brings us to the city of Athens, where the trial of Orestes is going to occur. So when Orestes gets there, Athena arrives after there's a bit of interplay between Apollo and the Furies going back and forth. Athena arrives and says, "Sorry I'm late. I was off taking care of the tribute at Troy, getting it all divided out, and then I heard what was going on and I came rushing back." It's quite interesting to hear this goddess who is about to apportion justice for this murder, herself seeming to be pretty biased when it comes to the actual outcome of the Trojan War. So one wonders immediately, is this going to be a person who's actually going to be objective? You'll find out. Okay, so Athena arrives back, and she hears what is going on with Apollo and the Furies and Orestes, and concludes that she herself is not in a position to pronounce judgment. So she decides to set up a new trial of 12 people. This council that thereafter is going to be known as the Areopagus Council. Areopagus, the word in Greek, means the hill of Ares. That's the god of war, and in Athenian culture, it's where the soldiers would train. So this council also, of course, up on the hill was the place where the court was held. And this is supposed to be a ritual explanation from mythology of why that court existed there. And of course, as we remember, politically, this is the court that was set up by the Archon Solon in 594 BC, a good more than a century before this play was produced. Okay, so the trial gets underway. And we have presentation by Apollo, and presentation with Orestes' help, and then presentation by the Furies. And Athena calls for the 12 members of the jury to cast their votes, which they do with pebbles that they drop into urns. And that becomes the normal way in Athenian culture for votes to be cast. And then Athena says something quite interesting. She says, "If this should turn out to be a tie, I will vote in favor of Orestes, because I myself do not believe in the role of a mother as being important on a legal standing, since I myself never had a mother." So now really does come that question about Athena's bias. In fact, can she really be considered an impartial judge? Well, it's very likely that had Orestes been convicted, she would have allowed that to go forward. But it is interesting, nonetheless, to see that she has a personal stake in the outcome. As it turns out, the vote is tied 6-6, and consequently, Athena's vote does break the tie, and Orestes ends up being acquitted. The thanks that Orestes gives to the city of Athens, and therefore to Athena, is that Orestes assures that the cities of Athens and Argos will thereafter never be at war with each other. And indeed, it does turn out that although there were times that Athens and Argos were on opposite sides of a conflict, there never was historically any direct aggression between the city of Athens and the city of Argos thereafter. And there were frequent cases in which they were allied, especially very notably in the year 418 BC, which admittedly is quite a bit after this play, but there was a point when Athens and Argos had a very critical alliance. So even though that was not known at this time, there is a bit of foreshadowing as to what type of dealings the cities of Athens and Argos could potentially have. So in any event, with the successful acquittal of Orestes, Orestes is able eventually to go on his way. He will eventually find his way back over to Sparta. Eventually he will become king, although some further things go wrong with him later on, but that is for a different story told at another time. All right, so that takes care of the whole matter of the house of Aeschylus, including getting Orestes acquitted, and that would seem to end the curse. The problem, however, is that it does not end the haunting of the Furies, who now, of course, are blood mad themselves at the city of Athens, and now they wish to destroy it. So it's at this point where Athena steps up and says to the Furies, hang on a minute, let's talk about things a little bit before anything bad happens. And it's at this point where Athena tells the Furies that she is going to welcome them into the city of Athens to become the protectress goddesses of Athens, and that is why they become the Eumenides. Their name changes to reflect that they now become protecting goddesses instead of goddesses of nemesis or vengeance. Now, one of the important points about this is that the old style of justice of eye for an eye, which is what the Furies are essentially carrying out, is being supplanted essentially by civilized law, especially as seen here in the city of Athens, and especially with this particular trial being carried out by humans, by peers of Orestes essentially. So we get a sense, therefore, that justice is supposed to be evolving over time, away from the old-fashioned tit-for-tat kind of justice, and now into a form of justice that's much more civilized and much more legal-based. Another point also is, of course, that in taking the Furies away from the world of the darkness, out into essentially into the light, as it were, to become the kindly ones, the protecting goddesses, Athena essentially dispatches the darkness that had overshadowed this entire trilogy, and finally brings light to shine into the darkness. So remember back with Agamemnon, it started with darkness, with this single man, the watchman, up on the tower, watching out for the fire, and then that flame of fire comes along and bursts into the darkness. That's our first moment in which the old style darkness is going to be burst through. Now, finally, at long last, the darkness is completely removed and is replaced with light. So it's quite striking to see this trilogy, despite being a tragedy officially, ending in what seems to be quite a positive note, with the equivalent of Orestes and the transformation of these goddesses of terror into goddesses of protection and well-wishing for their patron city. What's going on there? What exactly was Aeschylus trying to do? Well, in our final video, we're now going to get back to the politics of the situation and make clear probably what Aeschylus had in mind. So we'll see you for the final video for this session, as well as for this group of 4 videos in this series.